This is TechTalk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. TechTalk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome back to TechTalk Detroit. Brian Spurgeon and myself, Chuck Lobert here. And we're going to talk to you today about Microsoft 365, or as you may know it, Office 365. A lot has changed recently where they're changing names. They came out with Microsoft 365 quite a while ago, but now they're starting to kind of migrate everything from the Office 365 naming convention to the Microsoft 365 naming convention. And when we look at it as a Microsoft partner who deals with this stuff every single day, we get confused looking at the different licensing and what's included in what, and how do you figure out what's the right license for this particular company versus this particular company. So we thought it'd make sense to take a little bit of time today and kind of go through what the Microsoft 365 licensing looks like, what's included in the different packages, and as a company, how do you choose what is the right package for you? And I know, Brian, this is something that your team deals with a lot. Something I get a lot of questions on when I'm out talking to people about, how do we know what we should be doing with Office 365 and so on. So, we kind of talked before this and thought this might be a good topic to hit on this week.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Chuck. I think, just when we seemingly got comfortable with understanding their license packages and what was included, they hit you with a curveball and change it up for no rhyme or reason, it seems to be sometimes. So here we are, but hopefully we can bring a little bit of clarity and give a good breakdown and ultimately, some recommendations based on your business, what your requirements are, and what license package probably makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, it's everything from the home versions to the enterprise versions ultimately have been shifted to this Microsoft 365 naming convention, but yet on the enterprise versions, there's still the Office 365 naming convention as well. So we'll hit on that a little bit too, because again, that adds to the confusion of everything. The business plans have all been switched to Microsoft 365 plans, but whereas you used to have Office 365 Business Premium, now that's considered Microsoft 365 Business Standard, and yet there's a Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So this is where we really get into things and things can get confusing. So when we look at this, I guess the first thing to probably consider is really if we're a business that's looking to go to Microsoft 365, the first point is how do we choose between the E plans and the business plans? From there, I think we can kind of break down now within the business plans or with the E plans, the enterprise plans, how do you choose which one there? So I think the first delineation point is really at the number of users that you have. Your business plans are only going to work for you if you're below 300 users or up to 300 users. Beyond that, you really lose that option. Now you got to go enterprise level. So that's probably the first point where you got to start looking at it. But let's talk through some of those other points that we might have to look at if we're trying to first decide between business and enterprise.
Yeah, so I think just starting with the business plans, assuming that you're under the 300 users, the next differentiator is based upon your need for the actual Office applications or not. So if you're a company that uses volume licensing and purchases your Office outright, then there is the first plan that you probably settle in on is going to be the Microsoft 365 Business Basic. And that plan was formerly called Office 365 Business Essentials. What that one will give you is Exchange Online, which would be your email. You get OneDrive access, SharePoint, and Teams, but it does not include any of the software. And it also does not include some of the advanced security functionality.
So it's basically just all of your online versions of
exactly
all of the different softwares without having the local software, correct?
Exactly, that's correct. And then the next one I think is probably one of the more traditional plans is now Microsoft 365 Business Standard, and that was formerly Office 365 Business Premium. So that's the first plan that is going to include the full version of all the software, so that you can install it on your computers, your mobile phones, tablets. That's going to give you your 5 installs, and that's also going to include the same functionality as the Business Basics. So you're going to get your email, your OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And then looking ahead from there,
let's stop there for a second, because a little bit of clarification. I know I've gotten this question a lot. When we talk about being able to install it on 5 computers, it's not that you're a 10-user company. You can buy 2 licenses and install it on 5 different computers each. It's 5 computers per user, or per, it's not even necessarily just a computer, but a phone, a tablet. So what it's meant for is, let's say I've got, my laptop, I've got my iPad, I've got my iPhone, and I've got a home computer. That's 4 installs for me. It doesn't mean that I can now go and install it on your laptop as well, because I got 1 extra, because you have to be able to log in as that user, and therefore you're going to see, if I logged in as me on your computer, you'd be able to see all of my information. So, that's a question that I know I get quite a bit, that I wanted to hit on.
That's definitely per user. Yeah, because you have to be, if you notice when you're in any of the Office 365 apps, you're actually signed in as yourself. So you have to be logged in, and it's not gonna allow you to have a workaround to buy 1 license and distribute it to 5 employees. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to touch on is Office 365 Business Premium really used to be kind of the go-to offering. If you were a small to medium-sized business, if you were under 300 users, it was kind of the first Office 365 plan from a cost standpoint that included everything that you quote unquote needed. But really that's shifted quite a bit, because security has become such a big focus now around Office 365 that really that's why they came out with the Microsoft 365, between that and being able to get the licensing for Windows 10, all of that. But that's really where now the focus and the real kind of introduction really hits our recommendations, is the Microsoft 365 Business Premium. I'll let you kind of go into what the details are around that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The sophistication of security threats now has kind of elevated the baseline of what we would recommend. And I think, this is kind of the plan I would be looking to start out at, would be the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, which was formerly 365 Business. And this is probably the first point where it's the most confusing, because it's using Business Premium, and it's nowhere near the same as what the traditional Office 365 Business Premium plan was. But again, this one's going to include all of the elements of 365 Business Standards. So you're going to get all the apps, online, OneDrive, SharePoint. You're going to get Teams. But the big advantage of this one is it's going to include 2 additional components that Microsoft offers. One is going to be Microsoft Intune, which is used for mobile device management. And the other plan is going to be Azure Information Protection, which gives you some very unique security features to manage your environment. So focusing on the first one, Intune, what that'll do is allows all of your devices to be enrolled into your organization's Microsoft 365 time. That way they can be managed. So you can do things like enforce version updates on your Windows computers. You can have requirements such as restrictions on where you're accessing SharePoint files from. And you can really get that level of control to make sure that users are accessing your corporate data in a situation that is secure and trusted. The other part is the Azure Information Protection, which includes a good portion of it. It's called Advanced Threat Protection. And what that'll do is that does a lot of very intelligent scanning of your emails. As emails are coming in, it's going to look at things such as attachments and quickly open them and evaluate, is there anything in this attachment that would be risky? It also does a lot of things such as giving you the ability to wipe data. So if somebody lost or had a laptop stolen, this on top of Intune is going to give you the ability to either lock down that computer or do a remote wipe if you're concerned about any of your company data being compromised.
The important part there is it allows you to do that without touching the personal. So a lot of companies now, right, aren't necessarily issuing company phones. They're letting people, the BYOD, they're letting people bring their own devices, bring their own phones and such. So there's always kind of been this concern around, well, how can I wipe that device? Because that's their personal device. It has their, pictures of their kids and all of that kind of stuff. But with this, you can wipe just the business information and leave all of their personal stuff still intact in there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. If you're the type of company that has a bring your own device policy, this really allows you to do that without compromising the personal data. And I think that's huge. And especially in today, everybody has your cell phone, and you're one click away from getting to email or getting to your files. So I think it's very important to be able to have the control over that, but to also not have it so controlled that your users are concerned about what you can see. So it just limits it to the company data. There's no way to access pictures, text messages, and all that you would have on your cell phone. And then I think really the last big feature advantage of this plan is going to include the Windows 10 enterprise functionality, which gives you two real advantages. One, you have the ability to manage the Windows 10 Defender antivirus and malware. So you get advanced functionality there. You have the ability to where if an endpoint was compromised, you can lock it down from your company resources before it has an opportunity to spread to other endpoints, which is just a common thing that we see. That's the goal of these hackers and such when they try to compromise a workstation, is to maximize the spread as quickly as possible. So I think this is a great feature to help restrict in the event if something did happen, And I think the other thing is that you get some automation in terms of rolling out apps. So you can configure some policies where you make your onboarding a little easier, just by logging in to a brand new computer and logging in with a user's email address. It can auto deploy Office apps, for example, or enable some of these, local policies you would like to restrict.
Yeah, and I think too, we've talked in the past about, around Windows Virtual Desktop, this multi-user experience where you can kind of have the same experience if you're on your virtual desktop or if you're on your actual home computer, or not home computer, but office computer. This version of the Microsoft 365 plan, the Business Premium, is the first one that gives you that licensing to support that without having additional costs and everything too. So, something that we've talked about in the past that I think is important to bring out as well is to have that true kind of seamless experience between your Office desktop or laptop and your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. This is that first level of licensing that gives you that real seamless experience.
Absolutely. So then, yeah, that wraps up kind of the business plans there. And then that gets us into kind of the next tier of plans that they offer. And that's going to get us into more of the enterprise grade plan. So obviously, if the first deciding factor is going to be your users. So if you're north of that 300 user account, you fall right into these plans. You have to choose it. But I wouldn't get hung up on the user counts because, even a 10-person company, there's plans in here that honestly I would recommend just because there's enough value add for the price difference that you should be considering this and not just be simply focused on the user counts.
Yeah, I agree. And, also the other big thing I think that comes into play here is the size of the email boxes. So, with the business plans, with all of them, you get a 50 gig mailbox. When you go to the enterprise plans, correct me if I'm wrong, but with all of them, you move up to that 100 gig mailbox with the unlimited archiving. So, although there was a time when I thought having bigger than a 50 gig mailbox was unheard of, we've seen lots of instances where that is the case, and people have 60, 70, 80. Like I even think of myself, I don't really ever delete anything. I want to be able to search and go back and everything, but when you apply that type of philosophy to somebody that's maybe graphic design or dealing with CAD drawings, different things like that, where there's these large attachments that are in their emails, that you can kind of eat up that 50 gig relatively quickly. So that's really kind of the other point where you might need to start going towards the E3 or beyond that, all of the E plans are going to give you some more advanced security. So the Microsoft, the 365 Business Premium plan gives you a step up in security. But now when you go to the E plans, you get another step up when you're talking about security with higher level options with multi-factor authentication and stuff like that. So that's really where E3 might be a really good plan, even if you're a smaller organization from the seats standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And in terms of the size, I'm the same way. I can't tell you the last time I actually deleted an email, and I've gotten so used to my online archive that I don't even think about it anymore. I have it set to every year. Basically, any emails older than a year just automatically fall into that online archive, and it's perfect because if I ever need to go back and search for something 7, 8, 9 years ago, I don't have to think about it. It's just right there.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a huge point. So, there's a lot of industries such as, legal, for example, right? There's tons of email communication going back and forth. There's probably a lot of documents being shared. And I think, a lot of times you're just going to kind of fall on this level of a plan. But yeah, just kind of diving into these, I think the two that we'll probably focus on the most is going to be just the E3 and the E5 plans.
Mm-hmm.
And really just, there's a lot of plans beyond what we're discussing today. There's a lot of them aimed at education and nonprofit and government, but we just want to focus on the traditional business plan. So looking at E3, you're going to get a lot of the same stuff. You're going to get the applications included, installs on 5 computers. Like you mentioned, you get the increase in email storage, which is huge. Yep. You're going to get Teams, and you get meetings included too. So that's one of the first additions, I would say, is the ability to set up conference calls. So if you're one of those companies that wants to set up, you need to set up appointments with different clients and such, and you want to be able to conduct your own conference, you're going to have the licensing level in this tier to be able to do those kind of things. In addition, though, I think some of the key things is going to be from the security standpoint. So with the compliance, with this section, you get a lot of different conditional access policies that you don't get on the first tiers. So with the Microsoft standard plans, you get the business plans. Those include at least the Microsoft standard and Microsoft Business Premium. You can do MFA on your Office 365 tenant, but it's going to be much more of it's going to be an all or nothing type scenario. So you have to enable it for the entire organization, and you don't get any kind of conditions that you want to abide by. So for example, anytime you're going to go to SharePoint under one of those plans and you have that policy enabled, which you should, you're going to have to generate an MFA token every single time. The advantage you get into in this tier of plans with the enterprise is you can dictate when you want MFA to come into play. So let's take the current climate that we're in. We're all in this work from home model, right? We're on unsecure internet connections at homes because most of us don't have $2,000 firewalls protecting. So under that situation, we would recommend that MFA is involved every time you have to access the Office 365 portal. It's on an internet circuit that you're not managing. But let's say we go back to work next week, you're back in the office. It's nice when you're in the office to not have to do that every time you go to pull up a file on SharePoint. So you can create a rule that says from your office location, it's trusted, and we're not going to require an MFA. However, when you go to a coffee shop or you go to a home, then we will require it. And I think that's just a perfect situation. I think that's ideal. And I think it allows you to be secure, but without impacting productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, in the world that we live in right now, it's a requirement. That's where it's at. And that's, I think, the big change of why we see Microsoft making this change from Office 365 to Microsoft 365 is these used to all be add-ons to the Office 365 plans, but I think they were seeing that not enough people were really taking advantage of these add-ons to properly secure the environment. So they decided, we're just going to come out with these new offerings, and they're just going to include them. So really, it's Microsoft saying, here's what you have, what you really should have. So we're just going to package it all together. And then, beyond that, I think the big difference when you go from E3 to E5 is now you're adding the voice capability. So a lot of people may not know that now you can use Teams as a phone system, really as a business phone system. So you can either, again, add it on to your existing plans, or if you go with the E5 plan, it includes all of those features to be able to get that phone system, so to speak, going. And the other big difference that I noticed was that the Microsoft 365 E5 plan includes Power BI Pro. So we're all looking for ways to get more data out of, or more analytics, I guess, out of the data that we have within our business, whether it's within our CRM, within our ERP, or whatever it may be. And so that's where now Power BI comes into play, is you can tie it directly into your system, to your SQL database or whatever it is, and start pulling data out of it to be able to help you to make more informed decisions in regards to your business. So that's another huge benefit there. Is Power BI is a very powerful platform once it's set up and everything's, you're getting all of the data that you want, being able to kind of drill down into that data and really be able to make sense of it. It's hugely powerful.
Yeah, and I think even honestly, the My Analytics is a feature that I love myself. And I think when you get that weekly report and it tells you, it breaks down the amount of time you spent in meetings, and it also shows you, how much free time you had, unscheduled time. And when you look at it, it really makes you aware of, am I using my time the most effectively possible? Like if 80% of your time is in meetings and only 20% of it is free, and that's kind of where we were at. First started looking at it. You start to wonder, like, okay, I need to get this kind of flipped around. I need the meetings to be way less, and I need to have much more free time to work on the things that come out of these meetings. So I think it's just another good tool as we try to just move into this age of collaboration and productivity, to be much more cognizant of how we're spending our time. And then in terms of,
so the one I like too is the quiet hours. You get the email every week that tells you how many you got of quiet hours being uninterrupted, and it considers quiet hours basically anything outside of your business hours. So for us, that's outside of 8 to 5, and it cracks me up because every time I get it, it says you had 0 quiet days, and so that kind of helps me to think about, well, wait a minute, what am I doing after hours? Maybe I need to, one of the things I did recently was turning off the notifications on my emails, because I figure if it's something that's really important, somebody will call me or they'll text me. So it kind of helps you to see that work-life balance and how you might need to make a couple of changes to help yourself, be a little bit more balanced towards life versus just work.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. The other piece is just the last real big differentiator between the two is going to be with the MFA plans and differences. So one of the E5 plan, different from the E3 plan, is going to be the fact that it's going to look a little bit more in detail in terms of where your logins are coming from. And rather than just approve an MFA request based on whether or not you entered a token successfully, the E5 plan is going to go an extra step in terms of security and look at where the request even originated from. And if it sees that it's outside of the norm, because it knows your work habits, where you connect to your resources from, that's going to trigger a whole process where it's going to flag that user account as risky. And now, based on what policies you have, you might say, I can't afford to have any kind of compromised accounts whatsoever. So it will immediately lock down that user account until somebody goes in there and says either, yes, this was acceptable, or no, this is a threat. We need to figure out what's going on. So you get that extra layer of security. And it also includes the advanced threat protections for the whole Windows environment. So if you have servers in Azure, if Windows 10 computers, and then also your Office 365, they're all talking to each other. They're all aware of what's going on. So anytime there is something compromised, all the resources respond together, and they're all restricted and locked down based on what policies you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, this podcast will help people start to try to navigate through the difficulties around understanding all of the different licensing that's available. And there are still, the Microsoft or the Office 365 business plans were all replaced with Microsoft 365 business plans. On the enterprise side, there are still the Office 365 SKUs, at least as of today, my assumption is that they're slowly, kind of going away from those, and that in time those will go away altogether, and everything will move to that Microsoft 365 SKU. But the hope is that we're able to help you a little bit kind of navigate through that and figure out what's the right plan for me. And of course, as always, you can send in questions, and we're happy to answer them. And in 2 weeks, we're actually going to have our rep on from Microsoft as well. So we look forward to that as well. Get probably a little bit more in depth into some of this. Next week, we're going to have a special guest on with us from our security partner, Arctic Wolf. So we look forward to that as well, and we hope that you come back and join us in the next couple of weeks here.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.